now we move to the topic of American-China in the context of pandemic. How has the pandemic affected American manufacturing industries?
Well, listen, it's affected American manufacturing industries the way it's affected China's manufacturing industry, the way it's affected the world through the huge negative impact on shutting down the global economy. I mean, it has been shut down, you know, all I can do in particular, I don't know all the statistics for Europe and the rest of the world, but I do know what's happening in this country. And in a few short weeks, we've got 40 million people out of work. 40 million.
Yeah.
The workforce is somewhere like 180 million or less. 40 million people out of work collecting unemployment. Businesses shut down everywhere. The manufacturing sector, steel industry that I'm familiar with, is running at 50% of capacity as opposed to where it was near 90%. The auto industry in this country has completely shut down. It's just talking now about restarting. All the supply chains in this country, all of the downstream businesses, all the service industries are getting hammered. Restaurants, hotels, airlines, cruise ships, the banks, everybody's getting hammered. And so, you know, this is a major, I mean, the costs of this outweigh 1,000 times any benefits we've had by helping China develop. In one swoop of a virus that China did not contain when they should have, when they had the ability to, when they ended up stifling their own doctors from getting the word out, when they allowed passengers in the hundreds of thousands to travel the world, knowing that they were infected. And the world gets this. The world knows this. And no amount of propaganda on the Communist Party's part is going to change that. So the world's economy is suffering and the manufacturing.
President Trump is using privileged conditions to allure the American companies to move out of China. How effective do you think would these policies be?
I think that they will be very effective. The president has already, with his tax reforms, massive regulatory reforms, the trade reforms that he's made and is continuing to make, and the energy reforms, all of these things have made it the United States a better place to compete from, to build your business, to build your manufacturing sector. The continued execution on those 4 points, which will continue in his second term, which he will win, will just strengthen the incentives to reshore. But that alone is not enough. And so there'll be additional incentives to help manufacture, like the Japanese have done, where they are offering billions of dollars to Japanese manufacturers to uproot their facilities and bring them back to Japan. Even if the Chinese don't let them bring the facilities back, they will rebuild new ones there in Japan. I think that you will see similar things on the part of this administration. And there'll be a mixture of positive incentives and negative incentives. The tariffs are an example of incentives that create additional costs for companies to do business outside the United States. So those will stay in place, or maybe even get worse if China continues its rogue behavior. But I tell you what is most interesting, and I say this with a very heavy heart, but what China has done by unleashing this virus on the world and literally undermining the entire global economy to an extreme depression state level, what they've done is they've just increased the incentive for CEOs, business leaders, and governments to bring the supply chains and the manufacturing out of China to other places in the world. And the United States will get more than its fair share of that. But it's a huge mistake. what they've allowed to have happen. Again, I don't know if it's deliberate or not. It may be, it may not. But the way, the incompetence at which they handled this allowed it to unleash itself on the world. It did nothing to stop it. And this is just providing a huge driving force, more than any of the other incentives that any government could create to get out of China. Now, manufacturing still needs to be in China. There's a lot of people in China. But what will happen is manufacturing for sales in the United States will be done here, and more exports around the world, and elsewhere around the world as well, in other countries. You hear France talking about bringing back their manufacturing, and you won't hear Germany talk about it because they never lost it, because they play the same game as the Chinese when it comes to currency manipulation or what have you, another subject. All of these things that this administration has put in place, plus the huge driving force that China has created, will drive and incentivize companies to bring balance to the world trading system and manufacturing system.
So China has used the trade as a weapon to punish Australia, merely for its push for an independent inquiry into the origin of the coronavirus. What is your view?
Another huge mistake. Excuse me.
It's fine. Yeah.
Another huge mistake. It's something that the CCP, I call them the bullies of Beijing. What they think that they can just do these kind of negative things to countries just for standing up for what should be an investigation they welcome, unless they have something to hide. To me, it shows panic on the part of the Chinese Communist Party. It's a panic that things are getting out of control, and the more a bully panics, the more they lash out. And China's been lashing out everywhere, and this is just one example. There's over 100 countries that signed up to support the proposal for China to conduct an investigation, along with Canada, along with Australia. And this move on their part was a huge mistake again, and it's a huge mistake that's being made out of panic and fear of losing control.
So to retaliate the U.S. new export ban of chips supply to Huawei, Chinese government announced to include American companies like Apple, Cisco, and Boeing, etc., into unreliable list and launched investigations. What's your comment?
My comment is almost a repeat of what I just said about Australia. All right, they are the Chinese Communist leadership is just compounding their mistake. They're compounding it by creating more incentives for these companies to move out of China. They're creating more incentives on the part of the governments of the world to say enough is enough, and to start to come together, which is what Trump was hoping for all along, is that the world countries would recognize in time that China's arrogance would be something they'd all need to respond to. And so this is another huge mistake on their part. It's the Beijing bullies acting as bullies, lashing out, panicking that they're losing control. They need to do just the opposite, but they're not, and they'll continue to do this, and it'll continue to backfire on them.
Flow USA got a contract with the federal government to produce coronavirus therapeutics. What does this imply to you?
Well, it's much, much, much bigger than just the coronavirus therapeutics. They're building a new drug production company. This is not unlike Nucor entering the steel industry as a little tiny player, and everybody said these guys will never succeed. They'll never be able to grow to be bigger than U.S. Steel or Bethlehem Steel or Nippon Steel or anybody else. We proved them wrong. Here, what you're having is a small company that's getting started, that is getting support from the government because the government recognizes that China can't be trusted, that it needs to bring back the supply chains on pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and the ingredients, along with broader manufacturing goals of bringing back the supply chains. And this company is the first step in the actions that are going to be taken to rebuild pharmaceutical manufacturing of critical pharmaceuticals and the ingredients for those pharmaceuticals in the United States. France is going to be doing the same thing. The government is saying we want to help you do that. The big companies have got too much vested in China, and they're going to be slow to act. They're going to fight these things. So the Trump administration is going to help build the nucleus of a new drug industry based upon new technologies, innovations that have yet to be put into operation. And it will force the larger companies to come along and to move their facilities back to the United States or lose out. And they will be protected from the predatory practices of anybody in China that tries to undermine them by dumping products into this country. So it's a great move. It's the beginning of a new day in the pharmaceutical manufacturing in the United States and outside of China.
How would the American manufacturing industries be after the pandemic?
Well, the manufacturing industries will be as good as the economies are. As the economies continue to recover, the manufacturing sectors will recover. But I think there'll be an added benefit over the next 3 to 10 years that come to the manufacturing sector in this country because of China's repeated bullying and mistakes, continuing to create the incentives for manufacturers to bring their manufacturing out of China and much of it back to the United States to serve the U.S. market and North American market. So in general, the manufacturing sector will recover as fast as the general economies in our country and other countries around the world. But I think there's going to be an added impetus for manufacturing in this country because of the virus that has been set upon the world and the ramifications of that and how China has handled it.
What are the prospects for world trade after this pandemic?
World trade is never going to go away. But what will happen is it will be done on a more level playing field. It will be done with rules that are adhered to, and if not adhered to, there will be stiff penalties imposed upon those who are undermining the rules, as opposed to what's taken place over the last 20 years. And world trade will continue. You'll see trade move in different directions because as manufacturing leaves China and comes to the United States and other countries around the world, they're going to lose the ability to export their products here. So the manufacturing bases, as they strengthen around the world, will become exporters again to other areas of the world, but they'll be more reliable exporters. They'll be exporters that produce a quality product, not one that is poisonous or dangerous, which is the Chinese history. And there'll be things that go from there into China that didn't get imported into China before. But if China does do the right thing, does join the world community the way they promised to, global trade will just flourish. It'll have different directions, and different magnitudes in different directions, but it'll be one that raises the world up and not one that destroys the world at the expense of another.
Do you have other things to say about the U.S.-China relations?
I've said a lot. I haven't really held anything back, which is not my style. My style is to speak my mind and to speak the truth as I know it. I'd like to give China some advice. I'd like to give the Chinese Communist Party some advice. They may or may not listen to this. But they need to wake up. They need to sit back and say, okay, we got away with all the shit we pulled, excuse my French, all the cheating, all the stealing, all the manipulating, all the lying, and all the undermining of the WTO and what we promised to do. We've gotten away with it for 20 years. Look what we've built. Pretty spectacular. Okay. I don't like the way you built it. I don't like how it's hurt the rest of the world. It's not the way it's supposed to be done. But what you've accomplished is pretty amazing. Chinese people are smart. They work hard. They'd work even better if they weren't manipulated and controlled by you guys the way you do, and persecuted. Churches weren't burned, and people were allowed the freedoms that they should have. And you need to change your way on that as well, not be so fearful of your population that you have to control them that way. But you need to get back on track. You need to make amends to the world. You literally need to apologize. And the best apology is one where you put your money where your mouth is. You need to forgive all the loans you've made to the world, all the money that you have loaned to these countries and your Belt and Road where you've taken advantage of them. You need to forgive all those debts. You need to say, we are sorry. We are forgiving those debts. You own those facilities. We want to work with you as partners, not as your enemy, not as your master, not as your bully. That's what China needs to do. And the future of China will be even brighter because the world will be working together, not against them, which is exactly what's happening now and going to get worse and worse and worse. God forbid it gets to the point where something militarily happens on either side. We don't need that. They don't need that. Nobody wins. They need to say, I'm sorry. They need to say, yep, we did take advantage of you, but we're smart enough now to know we've built a lot of good things. We've come a long way. We've created a huge middle class, the largest in the world. We still got a lot of poor folks, but we're going to start playing by the rules, and we're going to undo the damages that we've done by becoming an open market-based economy and following the rules that we agreed to and treating our people more like they should be treated. That's my advice to China. That's my advice to the leaders or any leaders in China that are willing to stand up to the bullies of Beijing. I hope it happens within those leaders that are there, and it'll be in the best interest of China and the world if it does. Stop your quest for global domination and begin your quest to be a member of the global community in a constructive, positive way. Right now, people view you as Nazi Germany. People view you as a threat to the world. You can do all the propagandizing you want. You need to reverse your course and do it with sincerity and do it by showing it, not just by talking about it. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today.
Oh, thank you so much, Dan. It's a privilege and pleasure to listen to your views.